Welcome to Hope Inc. Thank you for coming to our website and looking at our videos. Our videos are here to help families in accordance with Hope Inc.'s mission statement. In designing the mission statement for Hope Inc., it came out of a multitude of things, but the primary reason was we wanted children in our community to get the quality, the ethics, and the interventions that they deserve so they can reach their highest potential. So what is ethics? What is our code of conduct when it comes to working with those with disabilities? Well, the ethics in the code of conduct are going to vary based on each individual's license or certification to practice different therapy methods. Here at Hope Inc., because we believe in quality, ethics-based, and eclectic, meaning multiple evidence-based therapy methods, we like to prioritize utilizing clinicians. So clinicians that have licenses to practice in the area of marriage and family therapy, clinical social work, and psychology. Those are licenses to practice where we can employ an array of evidence-based therapy methods. So we're not bound to just one particular therapy method that often occurs when you're working with somebody that's simply certified. A certification allows you to practice in a very narrow domain, which you often find working with children with autism is a BCBA, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. And Board Certified Behavior Analyst certification is great at understanding applied behavioral analysis, and they have their own set of ethics and conduct. However, that narrow scope limits them to only practicing applied behavioral analysis. However, here at Hope Inc., because we believe in the quality, ethics, and eclectic ability to practice multiple therapy methods for our families, because that's in their best interest to reach their potential, we utilize clinicians to provide the therapy here. We also believe in the direct one-to-one therapist to be highly educated and to go through rigorous training. We want that ethics and the quality to put top priority into respecting the children, respecting the families, respecting that their program needs to be provided with quality, with chronic and constant oversight, with supervision provided by somebody that's capable of looking at that program from various different therapy methods. So if there's a lack of progression in one area, sometimes we can pull from another area to pick up. Or when we do assessments and looking at the particular therapy method that's going to work best for that child might not be ABA or applied behavioral analysis. It might be that only a portion of their program needs applied behavioral analysis, but another area of their program needs to employ from assistive technology, needs to employ from rapid prompting method, variances in cognitive behavioral analysis, other behavioral therapy models that aren't just simply restricted to applied behavioral analysis. So that's important when you keep those things in mind when determining a program for your child. And that is what we determined when we established our program here. Parents often request for their children with autism that they need ABA. So in looking at applied behavioral analysis, it focuses on principles that explain how learning takes place, and they can oftentimes be broken down into trials, or it can be done in the natural environment. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between applied behavioral analysis, as there are variances to it, and unfortunately a lot of families don't know that there are different types of ABA. They think ABA is one particular method, when in fact there's a lot of categorical differences between certain methods falling under the umbrella of applied behavioral analysis. And we want to teach families that, because that's important. We want to cater every service that we provide to each child individually, and we don't want to do one particular method for all children. The ABA techniques have been useful in building skills for learners, teaching them new domains of functioning based on their development of childhood. ABA techniques can be used in structured settings, such as the classroom. For lessons, they can be used in everyday situations, in the family home. It can be used community-based, out in the neighborhood, playgrounds, etc. It can be used for helping to facilitate social skills amongst friends. Some ABA therapy sessions will involve one-to-one interaction, and actually most commonly they will be involving one-to-one. Effective ABA interventions for autism is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It should never be seen as a cookie cutter or a canned set of programs or drills. On the contrary, we need skilled therapists to customize the interventions to each learner's skills, needs, interests, preference, and the family situation. We commonly use a developmental profile, Web Ables, that was developed by Dr. Partington, a clinical psychologist as well as a BCBA. We prefer this particular inventory to develop a child's program. As him being a psychologist, he broke down each child's level of development according to milestones that we know to be evidence-based as children progress and grow. So in using his inventory, it allows us to really defy that one-size-fits-all, and we look at the child developmentally according to those profiles, and then we design a program to fit for those ABA interventions. The therapist's development of treatment goals stems from a detailed assessment, like Dr. Partington's, and the goal is to have preferences for the child, obviously what we commonly refer to as reinforcement, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and looking at those preferences for the child and how we can get them motivated to do those skills based on the assessments and the goals that we ultimately put in their protocols. Treatment goals and instructions are, like we talked about, developmentally appropriate for each child in the areas most often of communication, social, self-care, leisure, motor development, and academic skills. So what exactly does that mean, those particular domains? Communication, obviously one of the hallmark symptoms of autism, is the spectrum of communication deficits in children will vary from some children being nonverbal to some being verbal but echoic, or some children verbal and just having some pragmatic or receptive language delays. It's very important that when you're developing those programs, communication be addressed first. Communication is a behavior, most people miss that. And being that we want an ABA program to address and progress in their behavioral skills, we have to look at communication and make that the most important part of their ABA plan. Sociability, what does that look at? Well, how social is a child? Often, again, the symptom of autism will be lack of social interaction. So how do we get a child to be social? Breaking down from small tasks of playing games to verbally communicating or non-verbally communicating, social interest, social reciprocity, things of that nature. When we look at self-care, the self-care of the children ranges again from that spectrum of can they dress themselves, can they brush their own teeth, can they do their hair, or if they're higher functioning, can they make their own bed, can they make their food, can they go to a grocery store and take care of themselves in purchasing items. When we look at play and leisure, we want to look at how does that differentiate from social? Because social oftentimes they'll say, well, play. And there really is a difference between those two. So play and leisure looks at, again, developmental milestones based on what does play look like. And there are different types of play. There's solitary play, there's interactive play. And we want to make sure that we're developing a child's program based on that level of play. Some children, unfortunately, with autism, depending on the severity, will oftentimes get to their optimal level, but they will remain there their entire lives. It won't be an ABA program that ends up with that child completely rehabilitating to normalcy, and that is hard for parents to hear. Unfortunately, that is the case, and what we want to do is get them to the optimal level, but when you look at play and leisure, sometimes you'll see a ceiling hit for the children. Not that they can't ever progress or make progression in their treatment, but sometimes there is a ceiling to certain areas. When we look at motor development, what does motor development mean? Motor is our movements, things that occur either gross motor or fine motor. We also have a very important factor called visual motor. Gross motor is the larger areas of the muscles that children climb things, they are able to swing, they can walk with appropriate gait. Those are oftentimes the gross motor areas that we're looking at. Fine motor looks at, can they point? Can they pick up a pencil? Can they type? Things like that. And oftentimes for our program when we're developing ABA, it's very important to link that with that communication piece that's also one of the pivotal areas. If a child is nonverbal and has very severe motor impairments, we need to look at those as not necessarily separate but interlinked, is how do we get that child to point so then therefore they can communicate. So sometimes the child will never be able to pick up a pencil, but they will be able to point, and we can get them to use assistive technology devices. We can get them to use letter boards. We can modify and not necessarily use PECs with exchanging of icons, but we can develop a board that's laminated that has some of those PECs icons and they can point to it. And obviously leading into transition to that ultimate goal of hopefully being able to use an iPad or Dynaboxes, fusions. There's a variety of assistive technology that when we look at fine motor and can they point, can they swift through a screen by flashing with their one finger, can we get them to use those skills appropriately? Lastly, when we talked about the treatment goals and instructions that are developmentally appropriate, we mentioned academic skills. Academic skills are oftentimes looked at when implementing an ABA program. Can they read? Can they write? Can they do math? Can they acquire a memory basis of history, science, social areas of study, things of that relevance for academic in nature? Oftentimes when you get into funding, which is a very common area that parents ask, if your insurance company or regional centers are funding your ABA, that funding source does not want to see academic goals in their treatment plans. The only person that is responsible under the law is the federal and state mandates or the school district for academic goals. So if your child has academic funding for ABA, then academic subdomains will be written into a treatment plan. However, if there is not academic funding and we see a shift in the area of ABA in children for autism, mental retardation, cerebral palsy, any child, even adults, with developmental disabilities, traumatic brain injury, any area that requires us to utilize ABA as evidence-based practice, we see that funding source is shifting primarily to insurance companies. They are now the primary funding source, as they should have been and happily are now. So keeping that in mind. Our ultimate goal with ABA is that we obviously want these learners to reach their potential. We want them to become independent and successful in the short term and the long term. Obviously keeping in mind being reasonable in terms of a child's optimal level of potential. Unfortunately, when we look at children with disabilities, we are dealing with a spectrum of high functioning to low functioning. So we want to always make sure that we're individualizing our basis of treatment for that child, and some will require more interventions and some won't. But the ultimate goal always is to get them to their potential optimally, to be independent as most successful as possible. So when we're helping a family plan applied behavioral analysis treatment, we want to look at what particular methods of ABA do we want to use. And there's oftentimes some confusion in this area because a lot of families and even professionals sometimes aren't familiar that there are variances of applied behavioral analysis. So we want to talk a little bit about that. There are two primary interventions of applied behavioral analysis, one being discrete trial training, DTT, one being pivotal response training, PRT. So let's help you understand the difference between those. DTT came from Dr. Lovis out of UCLA, and DTT breaks down trials into discrete areas where external reinforcement is applied. So what's external reinforcement? External reinforcement looks at tangibles, edibles, praise, liquids, items, things that a child prefers from their external environment. So they're asked to do a particular task that's based on their treatment plan, broken down in domains. And then upon doing that, they are given external reinforcement of their choice, their preference. So in a very shortened explanation, DTT gives positive reinforcement for very discrete trials once the children perform that activity. When we look at pivotal response training, PRT, that comes out of UC Santa Barbara, Dr. Kegel, who also did research with Dr. Lovaas at UCLA in his early days, he actually went on to develop the importance of internal reinforcement, so more child-led, child-focused, and looking at what's the internal reinforcement level of a child, and if we ask them to perform a particular task, we then reinforce them with the internal reinforcement. So how do you differentiate between external reinforcement and internal reinforcement? Obviously, like the name sounds, one is external, out in the environment like we talked about, edibles, tangibles, social praise. And internal reinforcement is what's going on internally in the child in that particular moment that they're leading us to want. And then therefore we ask them for the task or the demand, whatever that area of need that we're working on is. And as soon as the child gives us that proper response, we let them have their internal reinforcement. So for example, if we're doing discrete trial training and the goal is to say up, we would say, Johnny, say up. And if Johnny says up, we give him positive external reinforcement of an M&M. Actually, let's not use an M&M because kids aren't supposed to have dairy according to a lot of the emerging research. So let's give Johnny a gluten-free cookie. So we say, Johnny, say up, up, and we model that for him. Johnny says up, he gets a gluten-free cookie. It's an external reinforcement. Pivotal response training would follow Johnny around, and when Johnny wants to, let's say, go to the swing, and he's asking us to get up, we would say, Johnny, say up, up, and if Johnny gives us any type of effort to say up, or we would let Johnny go and we would help him up. So it's child-led, it's internal. He's wanting to go up, and so when we request the up and he gives it to us, we allow that reinforcement to occur. So I could give you a lot of examples, but that's probably the most common is difference between them is internal and external reinforcement. Now, discrete child training can be done in the natural environment. That's often a misconception that it has to be done at a tabletop, but you will see a lot of agencies solely do it at the table, when in fact that's a fallacy, that you can do discrete child training like pivotal response training in a natural environment. What really differentiates that is looking at the pivotal behaviors and the pivotal responses of the child in pivotal response training, hence the name, and allowing that internal reinforcement to occur, as opposed to discrete child training, choosing external reinforcement and providing that upon the child giving the response that we're looking for. So I hope that clarifies the difference in break-off domains of applied behavioral analysis. One last thing that we really feel is important for families to know about applied behavioral analysis, on top of the fact that it should be individualized, the goals, the treatment plans, the interventions, and always collaboratively done with the family, with a therapist that's very well educated, very well trained, is the fact that it requires documentation. Documentation is huge when we do applied behavioral analysis. We have to be able to show, and unfortunately this is the area of psychology that can be frustrating for a lot of therapists, is we have to show math. We have to show that we've documented that the child can actually do what we say that they can do, and we can do that with reports and scatter plots and different types of graphs where we show here's where the child's baseline was, and the baseline is when we took data, the documentation of the behavior in each categorical domain of what we're working on, and it indicates what was that child's functioning for that particular goal at that time. That's a baseline. And then as we're doing therapy, we need to document that what the child is doing and what we say that they're doing is in fact going on, and we do that by keeping notes. So with discrete child training, we use trial notes and look at percentages. With pivotal response training, we use fidelity notes that says what we're doing is working with fidelity, and we track those results on our papers that we're taking daily when working with the child, and we convert them into graphs and show this is where the baseline is, and then after treatment, this is where the child is. It really substantiates the area of applied behavioral analysis that separates it from other therapy methods that are evidence-based, is we're documenting what we say the child can do is actually doing. So make sure if you're using a program that employs ABA, always be on top of that data. Always look at where is my child at, and what is their preference assessment? What is their data looking like on goal progression? What areas are they lacking in, and how come we're not making progress in this particular area? And always sit down with your team and look at where can we go with this? Is this the proper method, or do we need something else? Now that we've looked at applied behavioral analysis and helped you understand in the best fashion we can in a limited time what applied behavioral analysis is, it's very important that families know that there are other evidence-based methods that need to be employed with our children with autism, mental retardation, cerebral palsy, any really learning disability, behavioral disability that are affecting our children. So in addition to applied behavior analysis, we have other evidence-based therapy methods that can be used and should be used. ABA is not the catch-all, end-all, and it's very important that families understand that. So what other evidence-based methods do we have? We have cognitive behavioral therapy. We have the use of assistive technology. We have token economies, visual schedules. There's an array of other therapy that you want to incorporate in your program. educational evidence-based therapy. So we have incidental teaching. An emerging area of evidence-based educational interventions is the rapid prompting method. And rapid prompting method we often use as an educational intervention for a lot of our families. And this was based off of Soma and her son Tito. Now, and trying not to get into a huge story, but it is in detail a great one nonetheless, Soma's story with her son is miraculous, and we see that miracle intervention daily here at our agency. Soma, a woman from India, came to the United States with CAN, and Pure Autism now was part of bringing her from India to here with her son Tito. Tito was like most of our children when you get into the moderate, severe spectrum of autism, often told mentally retarded, incapable of communication, left in a corner to stem for hours on end, given that prognosis of hopelessness. And obviously our name of our agency is Hope because we don't believe in hopelessness, we believe in hope. And the rapid prompting method really is an intervention that Soma brought here to the United States that gives families a lot of hope for not only the moderate to severe, when they're given those debilitating prognoses erroneously that their children can't speak, they can't communicate, they can't do educational activities and acquire and grow and progress to their optimum level. The rapid prompting method does work with higher functioning kids based on the fact that her program looked at neurology and looked at cognitive neurosciences of the brain and how that was impacting the children with autism, which was a complete contrast to the area in decades when we've solely looked at applied behavioral analysis as the only evidence-based intervention with children. So although, as I mentioned before, because we don't want to misspeak, the rapid prompting method is still emerging and is not scientifically evidence-based, I can say here at our agency, with the hundreds of children that we've seen, including my own son, this particular method is extremely effective, if not, in my opinion, superior in a lot of ways when we're getting into evidence-based educational interventions. So Soma came out with her son, who had been given that debilitating prognosis, and she developed the ability for a child to communicate starting with a letter board. Basically, that what they were seeing in their environment was often in the way of being able to tell us that they could in fact communicate by the neurology of the brain impacting their ability to show us that they knew and they were actually taking in information because of their physiological state that was getting in the way, and particularly oftentimes their motor movement. So their motor planning, their visual motor integration, and by use of a letter board, she was able to show us that these children can learn, that they can communicate, even though on the moderate to severe level or nonverbal or their echoic, whether it's delayed or immediate echolalia, was impacting their ability to communicate effectively. We're not allowed to speak about the method just because Soma has asked anybody that's taken the training course to obviously not teach it and respect that for her. But what we can tell you is you can go on her website and look up what it looks like, what her research is going into the area of education and how that will help families. Her son Tito now can obviously read, he can write, he has several published books, and he is a classic story of our children who, simply because they cannot talk and simply because their motor impairments are so severely impacted by perseveration and self-stimulatory behavior, is not an indicator that they cannot read and they cannot write. When done properly through the rapid prompted method, by giving them this visual field of a letterboard and teaching them through some help with motor planning and visual motor integration, they can learn, they can communicate, and we see that time and time again here at Hope Inc., and we hope that you can look into that particular method. So in the rapid prompting method, our children are approached respectfully with the confidence that they are capable of learning and responding to questions asked of them. This is the single most important, in my opinion, that we respect our children, that we believe in them, because time and time again it shows that they are able and capable in times when many professionals do not believe in them. In the rapid prompting method, the children are asked to be stimulated for their desired brain functioning. So we have a left hemisphere, and we have a right hemisphere, we have a frontal lobe, we have an occipital lobe. The brain acts in 3 different ways essentially from neurology: top to bottom, left to right, and front to back. So in the rapid prompting method, it's important to examine each child's level of functioning according to how that brain is operating, and then a program is designed around that, where the therapist paces herself to the student's pace of self-stimulatory behavior, as well as continuously speaks and talks to that child to stimulate the areas of the brain all at one time. So visual, tactile, kinesthetic, olfactory. There's dominances that occur in each of our brains, and the rapid prompting method really wants to look at how can we best optimize that for the child with a disability that has a either preferred or non-preferred dominance. So for example, my son, his preferred dominance is visual and tactile. So he will oftentimes, if no intervention is given to him, he will put himself in a corner for hours on end. He will visually look at his shoe, and he will take a pen or he will take stickers, and he will perseverate in self-stimulatory with the pen and the sneaker, so he can receive that dominance of his brain functioning that he's looking to calm his nervous system with. Now, when we employ the rapid prompting method for him, we know that because those are his dominants, he's lacking in the area that are the non-dominants of the auditory, the hearing, the kinesthetic movement. And when employing the rapid prompting method, we have to stimulate all those areas of his brain to help him focus, stay attention, stay engaged with us. So for Dominic, when pre-rapid prompting method, he was incapable of any communication. He was incapable of any academic functioning. And just a short 3 years later, he is able to read, he is able to write, he's able to talk to us on an iPad, albeit still nonverbal. He's communicating. He's communicating via his visual motor integration. That was the deficit. He wasn't able to visually look at something and then use his motor planning to tell us this is what I wanted. The rapid prompting method, through her fast-paced questioning, her prodding, her engaging in the different systems, combined with the alphabet board and spelling and communication to his needs, he has now progressed immensely, and we're very thankful to the rapid prompting method for that. In continuing with providing quality ethics-based therapy and utilizing different methods, it's very important that we are always practicing with the parents and helping the parents understand that parent training component and compliance with treatment is extremely crucial when we're working with our children. Parent training allows the parents to be educated in the same techniques we are. When we have a program that's only 10 hours a week, or if we're lucky enough to have 40 hours a week, that still doesn't end there when our therapists and our paraprofessionals and our supervisors stop monitoring the program. So a parent and the parent's capabilities to continue providing the therapy and creating an environment that helps that child continue to progress is extremely important. So we always involve our parents in that particular area of domain, looking at how can we get the parents educated, how can we empower the parents to utilize the same effective techniques in the environment when we're not there, how can they help the child with the assistive technology, with the reinforcements, with perhaps parents unbeknowing will do things or allow the child to engage in certain behaviors or use reinforcement that's counterproductive to their progress in their program. And so we always want to work together for the best interest of everybody involved. Parent training is also very important in looking at the advocacy piece for parents to advocate for their child. The parents are the number one front line for their kids if they're going to receive services. What kind of services are they going to receive? At what rate are they going to receive services, and for how long? Children in their educational environment, whether they're placed in a public school or a private school or they're homeschooled, parent involvement and parent advocacy is going to detrimentally impact that child if parents aren't on top of that. And we're very lucky with the vast majority of parents. They want to be involved, and so we love when that occurs, and it most often does occur here with our agency. We can train parents in the actual techniques that we do. We have a parent training manual that is, for the most part, parent friendly. It's not as technical as it is when our paraprofessionals and our therapists are going through their training to provide the in-home therapy or clinic-based therapy. So we have that manual available to families so they can understand what's positive reinforcement, what's negative reinforcement, what is a preference assessment, what is punishment, do we use punishment, how effective is punishment, how effective is positive reinforcement, what's a visual schedule, what is visual motor integration, how can I help my child progress with staying on top of things consistently, how do I balance my life when I'm trying to cook dinner or do laundry or help my other typical children, what's going on in the marriage. There's an array of parent training that we can offer to families. It's important as a collective whole to help the families in their entirety. Overall, the most successful cases are the ones when we have the parents that are willing to work with us really hard, even in times when there's strife and we want to, disagree, or we always come to that common ground that the most important and most successful thing is that we're all on board to help the child. We found that positive reinforcement, like the research shows, is the most effective treatment. We do not use punishment. And early intervention is always key, and we teach parents again that early intervention, according to evidence-based therapy, evidence-based research, is what we want to advocate for our children, even in times when school districts, when regional centers, when insurance companies, yes, there's a thread here that they are all our funding sources. So when those funding sources tell us, no, we're not going to do this, or we're going to do this, but less, or we're going to offer you this agency, even though it's a violation of certain laws, that the parent involvement and having a successful program for their child is us all working together to just really advocate for what is the law, what is the truth, and what is the best evidence-based therapy. And so working together as a team for our parent training is very important, and we appreciate all of our families that do that. In piggybacking on not using punishment, we don't use punishment as a particular therapeutic intervention. However, in times when a child becomes self-injurious or injurious towards others to an extreme level where we now do have to step in and provide safety measures, that we can't have somebody self-injurious to harm or aggressive towards others to injury, that what do we do? Since we don't employ punishment, we utilize CPI, Crisis Prevention Intervention Training. So what is CPI? CPI is Crisis Prevention Intervention. It's a training program that we use in lieu of punishment that's nonviolent interventions to make sure that the child is safe during times of self-injury, injuries towards others, or personal crisis. This particular training is designed to maximize the safety of all individuals involved. CPI teaches the staff and the parents, and we do offer CPI training to parents, how to physically intervene only in the case of emergency and an intervention when they're posing an immediate danger to themselves or others. It does involve physically restraining a child, but that physical restraint doesn't involve punishment or pressure or injury to the particular person that's in need of keeping themselves safe or keeping others safe. CPI is always used as a last protocol, and it involves blocking and holds to help protect or de-escalate the child. It helps with the intensity of the behavior, and sometimes you do have to be aware and stay on top of if there is a hold occurring chronically, can that adult be paired unfortunately with that particular person or parent in need of doing that as a negative connotation? Well, absolutely that can occur. That's kind of common sense. We don't need to be professionals to realize that. And so if we have a child that is extremely aggressive or extremely self-injurious, using CPI along with behavioral intervention, along with cognitive behavioralism, along with pharmaceutical, if necessary, or medical interventions, is the team approach that we can take to helping keep that child safe. Using assistive technology with our children is really important as well. What is assistive technology? It's a general term that looks at assistive, adaptive, rehabilitative devices for children and adults with disabilities, and it helps them process using a selecting, locating, and technology-based process for those that have communication impairments. Assistive technology, often with the name goes, is that we're using technology, some piece of equipment, a product, a system, whether it's acquired commercially, it's modified, we can customize them to each child. It will increase and help maintain and improve their function capabilities for the area of deficit, the communication that they're lacking. In other words, it's really helping them learn a lot easier and communicate a lot easier based on their disability that's getting in the way of showing us their potential. The AT promotes greater independence. It enables the children and adults to perform tasks where formerly they were unable to accomplish that. They've had difficulty with, obviously, verbal expression, or they've had difficulty with the pen or a pencil writing. And so AT is a very important supplemental area that can help bridge the gap between those areas of disability. AT can serve from the letter board that we talked about with the rapid prompting method. So simply a board that is in alphabetical order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they can touch that. It's basically assisting them. It's saying, here's an assistance for you to communicate with me. It can be a keyboard like a Fusion, or a standard computer with a keyboard, where they type into that and then it shows up on the computer. We use assistive technology all the time. Our email's assistive technology. Our iPhones, our smartphones, they're all assistive technology where we're typing into there some form of communication that's assisting us on a technological device, and then it's communicating to those around us. So children with disabilities, adults with disabilities, AT is a huge area of growth, and it really needs to be employed for all children. Every child should have assistive technology, and so if your child at school or at home does not, this is one area you want to get on top of immediately, because AT will really give them that independence and that capability of communication that they're lacking in. If you have a child where you sit back and say, I really love to do that, but I can't get them to use it, this is where, again, you want to find really good quality therapists and professionals that can say, when you say that to me, I understand, but I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to get them to use it. There is a way. And when you employ and use evidence-based practices that are quality and evidence-based, you will get that child to use that assistive technology. So don't give up hope with that there, and keep steadfast on finding that assistive technology device that works for them. Other common ones, obviously the iPad, the iPhone. There's a lot of programs that can be uploaded into those. Dynavox is huge for a while, although it's extremely expensive. The truth of the matter is, what we most commonly see with children that is effective is iPhones, the mini iPads, the iPad itself, or touchscreen computers. What you do want to be careful with assistive technology, the most common thing that we hear why children can't use it is either the visual motor integration, or two, is their self-stimulatory behavior, because they want to get into that internet and they want to play games, or they want to watch movies and fast forward and rewind, YouTube, things like that. So it's not necessarily that they can't use the assistive technology device, it's that their main preference is to get in there and do self-stimulatory behavior. And so you see that commonly misinterpreted understanding that they can't use it, as opposed to they don't want to use it, because their higher preferred activities on that assistive technology device. Let me give you an example. Going back to Dominic, a few kids that we have here. When they're presented with an iPad or they're presented with an iPhone, they will immediately ignore the request to communicate, or immediately not want to be motivated to use that to say, I want something. And it's paired with a stimulus response of a device that I can go in and now do my self-stimulatory behavior. And so you can't get them to work because they're so hyper-focused on taking that device and going onto the internet or going onto their apps. And so you want to be cognizant when using an assistive technology device, if there's a child that does have this ability to over-focus on using it as an actual preferred device to STEM, is take those apps off of there. Disable the internet. If you want your child to do those things and play those games, which we do not advise because for a variety of reasons, but if you do choose to do that, at least keep it off of their assistive technology device, because then it becomes very complicated, and we often will hear that they just won't use it, they want to just go on and do this. So be cognizant of that when you're looking into an assistive technology device for your child.